I'm 60 years old, and I'm sitting here in my kitchen realizing I can't remember the last time my husband actually looked at me. Really looked at me, not past me to check his phone. Not through me while thinking about work. But at me, the way he used to when we were young and I still believed I mattered to him. If this feeling sounds familiar to you, stay with me. You can like this video and subscribe if you want. I talk about the things women my age don't always say out loud, the quiet truths we carry alone. It was a Tuesday in February when I first let myself see what I'd been ignoring for years. We were eating dinner at the same kitchen table we'd had for 26 years. I'd made pot roast because it was Tuesday, and that's what I always made. Michael was on his phone. I was watching him scroll, waiting for him to look up. He never did. "Michael," I said, "how was your day?" He made a sound, not quite words, just acknowledgement that noise had happened near him. His eyes stayed on the screen. I waited. 1 minute, 2. The pot roast I'd spent 3 hours making was getting cold on his plate. He hadn't touched it, hadn't noticed. "The Johnsons are going to that bed and breakfast in Vermont," I tried again. "Remember we talked about going there for our 30th anniversary? That was 2 years ago. We never went. Michael said work was too busy." Then he stopped mentioning it at all. He said. Still scrolling, I took his plate and threw the pot roast in the trash. He didn't notice that either. That night, I lay awake next to a man I'd slept beside for 3 decades and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. We had a California king bed, plenty of room to not touch each other. I couldn't remember the last time he'd reached for me in the night. The last time he pulled me close just because. I thought about our wedding day. I was 28. He cried when I walked down the aisle. Later, he whispered, "I can't believe I get to wake up next to you for the rest of my life." That man felt like someone I'd imagined. The change happened so slowly, I didn't see it. Or maybe I saw it and told myself I was making things up. That's what you do when you love someone, isn't it? You make excuses. You tell yourself it's just stress, just work, just a phase. Everything's just something else until one day you realize it's just your life. 5 years ago, Michael took a promotion. Good money, long hours. The long hours became late nights. The late nights became weekends at the office. Somewhere in there, we stopped having dinner together. Stopped talking about anything real, stopped having a marriage, and started having a mortgage payment we both contributed to. 2 years ago, I tried to talk to him about it. We were driving home from his company Christmas party. I'd stood alone most of the night while Michael networked. When I reached for his hand under the table during dinner, he'd pulled away. His phone buzzed. That got his attention. I didn't. "Do you think we're okay?" I asked in the car. He looked confused. "What do you mean? Us? Our marriage? Are we okay?" He smiled like I was being silly. "We're fine, Janet. Just busy. That's life. That's life." 2 words that were supposed to explain why we'd become strangers. I dropped it. Told myself he was right. This is what happens after 30 years. You get comfortable. The romance fades. You can't expect butterflies forever. But it wasn't about romance. It was about being seen, being valued, being more than furniture that cooked and cleaned and existed quietly in the background. The signs were everywhere once I let myself look. 7 days since he'd kissed me goodbye. 14 days since he'd asked how I was feeling. A month since we'd had a real conversation. 3 months since he'd said he loved me. I didn't bring it up because, what do you say? You haven't told me you love me in 3 months and I've been counting? That makes you sound desperate. Needy. Like you're asking for too much when you should just be grateful for what you have. My friend Susan noticed. She came over for coffee in March and asked when Michael had last taken me to dinner. I couldn't remember. I actually couldn't remember the last time we'd gone out together, just us, because we wanted to. "Are you happy?" Susan asked quietly. I opened my mouth to say yes. The word wouldn't come. "I don't know," I whispered. It was the first honest thing I'd said in months. That night, I made Michael's favorite lasagna. I used the good plates, bought the expensive wine he liked. I even wore the blue dress he'd once said he loved on me. That was probably 10 years ago, but I remembered. He came home at 7:30, loosening his tie, barely glancing at the table. "Smells good," he said, already on his phone. "I made your favorite." "Great! I'm starving." We ate in silence. He took bite after bite of the lasagna I'd spent hours making. Never looked up. Never noticed the dress or the wine or the good plates or me sitting there trying so hard to reach him that my chest physically ached. "How was work?" I asked. "Busy." "Did the Henderson project go well?" He looked past me toward the living room. "It's fine. Is there a game on tonight?" Something inside me went cold and quiet. He got up, left his plate in the sink, walked to the living room. 2 minutes later, I heard the TV. I sat alone at the table with the good plates and the expensive wine and the blue dress nobody noticed, and I finally let myself think what I'd been avoiding for years. My husband didn't love me anymore. Maybe he had once. But whatever we'd built together, I'd been building alone for a long time now. He hadn't left me. That would have been clearer. Instead, he just stopped seeing me, stopped trying, stopped caring. And I'd stayed quiet through all of it, telling myself it would get better. This was normal. This was just life. But it wasn't life. It was disappearing while the person you loved most didn't even bother to look up from his phone. It wasn't always like this. I need you to know that. There was a time when Michael looked at me like I was the only person in the room. When he'd come home from work and the first thing he'd do was find me, kiss me, ask about my day like he actually cared about the answer. We met when I was 26. I was working as a secretary at a law firm downtown, and he was a junior accountant in the building next door. We'd see each other in the coffee shop on the corner every morning. He always ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin. I got tea with honey and a croissant. This went on for 3 months before he finally asked me to dinner. Our first date was at a little Italian place that's not there anymore. Michael was so nervous he knocked over his water glass twice. I thought it was sweet. He told me about growing up in Ohio, about his parents who'd been married 42 years, about how he wanted that someday, a marriage that lasted, a real partnership. "I don't want to be one of those couples who just exist together," he said that night. "I want someone I actually talk to. Someone who's my best friend." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He seemed to mean every word. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. We couldn't afford anything fancy. Our honeymoon was 3 days in a cabin upstate. No TV, no phone service, just us. We played cards, hiked through the woods, stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. Michael said those were the best 3 days of his life. I believe that too. The first few years were good, really good. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment where the heat barely worked in winter and the air conditioning was a window unit we'd bought at a yard sale. But we were happy. Michael would come home and tell me about his day, every detail, even the boring parts. We'd cook dinner together, arguing over whether to add more garlic or less. We'd fall asleep on the couch watching old movies, his arm around me, my head on his chest. When did that stop? I can't pinpoint an exact moment. It was more like watching something fade so gradually you don't notice it's happening until one day you realize the color's completely gone. The promotion. That's when things started to shift. Michael was 35, I was 33. He'd been working toward this position for years, and when he finally got it, we celebrated. Dinner at the nice restaurant downtown, champagne we couldn't really afford. He was so proud. I was proud of him. "This is going to change everything for us, Jan," he said that night, using the nickname he'd given me years ago. "We can finally start saving for a house, maybe even think about kids." We'd been trying for a baby for 2 years by then. It hadn't happened yet, but we were still hopeful. Still young enough to think we had time, the promotion came with longer hours. I understood that. New position, more responsibility. Michael started leaving at 7 in the morning instead of 8, started coming home at 7 at night instead of 6, then 7:30, then 8, "just until I get settled," he'd say, kissing my forehead as he loosened his tie. "Once I prove myself, it'll calm down." I believed him. I made dinner and kept it warm. I stopped making plans for us on weeknights because he was too tired. I adjusted. That's what you do, isn't it? You adjust. The weekends were still ours, though. Saturday mornings we'd sleep in late, make a big breakfast together. Sundays we'd read the paper, maybe go for a walk, just be together. I held onto those weekends like they were proof everything was still okay. Then the weekend work started. Just once a month at first. Big project deadline, important client, crisis at the office. Michael would apologize, promise to make it up to me. I'd say it was fine. I understood. Work was important. One Saturday became two. Two became every other weekend. Then almost every weekend. Our lazy Sunday mornings turned into me waking up alone, Michael already at his laptop at the kitchen table, coffee cold beside him, completely absorbed in spreadsheets and emails. "Michael, want to take a break? We could go to the farmer's market." "Can't, Jan. This presentation is due Monday. We could grab lunch at that new place on Main Street. Maybe next weekend." Next weekend never came. We stopped trying for a baby. We didn't decide to stop exactly. We just stopped. The appointments fell away. The hopeful conversations faded. The intimate moments that had once been about connection became so rare, I couldn't remember when they'd last happened. 3 months, 6 months, a year. I thought about bringing it up, but what was I supposed to say? That I felt lonely even though we lived in the same house? That I miss my husband even though he slept next to me every night? It sounded needy, clingy, like I was asking for attention I didn't deserve, so I stayed quiet and told myself this was temporary. Once things calmed down at work, once Michael felt more secure in his position, we'd get back to how we were, we'd reconnect, we'd remember why we fell in love in the first place. But things never calmed down at work. There was always another project, another crisis. Another reason why we couldn't have the conversation I was too afraid to start. I started filling my time with other things. Book club on Thursdays. Volunteering at the library on Tuesday afternoons. Coffee with Susan once a week. I wasn't trying to build a life without Michael. I was just trying to not notice how absent he'd become from the life we were supposed to be sharing. On our 15th anniversary, I made reservations at the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. It had reopened under new management. I thought maybe going back there would remind us of who we used to be. I bought a new dress, navy blue with little buttons down the front. I got my hair done. Michael came home at 8:30 that night. I was sitting at the table in my new dress, the reservation long past. "What's wrong?" he asked, seeing my face. "Our anniversary dinner. We had reservations at 7. He looked genuinely confused for a moment, then shocked. "Janet, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. There was this meeting that ran late and You forgot our anniversary?" No, I remembered. I just lost track of time. Let me change and we'll go somewhere now. Anywhere you want." But I didn't want to go anywhere anymore. I wanted him to have remembered. I wanted to have mattered enough that he'd marked it on his calendar, set a reminder, done something to make sure he didn't forget the 15 years we'd spent building what I thought was a life together. "It's fine," I said, taking off the new dress nobody would see. "You're tired. We'll celebrate another time." We never did. That was 7 years ago. And looking back now, I realize that was the moment I should have said something, should have told him I was drowning, that our marriage was slipping away and I didn't know how to save it. But I didn't say anything. I adjusted. Again. I told myself marriage was work and this was just a rough patch and we'd come out the other side stronger. The invisible part was the hardest. Not the big moments like the forgotten anniversary, but all the small ones that added up so quietly I didn't notice they were burying me. My 60th birthday was on a Saturday. I woke up that morning thinking maybe this year would be different. 60 felt important somehow. A milestone. The kind of day that should mean something to the person you've spent 3 decades with. Michael was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop. Same position as every weekend for the past 5 years. I stood in the doorway for a minute, waiting to see if he'd look up. "Say something, anything." "Morning," he said, eyes on the screen. I waited. 5 seconds, 10, 20. "Michael, do you know what today is?" "Saturday," he said. Still typing. It's my birthday. His hands stopped. He looked up then and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe. Or just the realization that he'd forgotten something he was supposed to remember. Janet, I'm sorry. I've been so busy with this project and we'll do something tonight. Anywhere you want. I'd heard those words before. After the anniversary, after the Christmases he worked through, after every occasion that mattered to me but somehow never made it onto his calendar. It's fine, I said, because that's what I always said. You're busy. I understand. I spent my 60th birthday alone, made myself a small cake, ate dinner by myself while Michael worked at the table. He did look up once around 8 o'clock and ask if I wanted to order takeout. As if that would make up for forgetting I existed on the one day a year that was supposed to be about me. That was 2 months ago. He still hasn't taken me to dinner. The thing about being slowly erased from someone's life is that you can't point to one big thing and say, that's when it happened. It's 1,000 small things, each one tiny enough that you tell yourself it doesn't matter. But they add up. They become the weight you carry around without realizing how heavy it's gotten until one day you can barely stand, like the way Michael started eating dinner in front of the TV instead of at the table with me. It started during football season. Just for the game, he'd said. Then basketball season, then baseball. Then it was just easier to eat on the couch than to sit at the table and have to make conversation. I still set his place at the table every night for 6 months before I finally stopped. He never noticed. Or the way he stopped asking about my day. For years he'd come home and that was the first thing he'd ask, "How was your day?" And he'd actually listen to the answer. When did he stop? I can't say exactly, but one day I realized it had been weeks since he'd asked, and longer since he'd cared about my response. I tested it once. Made up an entire story about running into an old friend at the grocery store, having coffee with her, making plans to meet again next week. None of it was true. Michael said, "That's nice," without looking away from his phone. He didn't ask who the friend was or where we were planning to meet. Didn't ask anything at all. He didn't know because he wasn't listening. He hadn't been listening in years. The holidays were the worst. Not because they were dramatic or because we fought. We didn't fight. That would have required him to be present enough to disagree with me. No, the holidays were hard because they made it impossible to ignore how alone I was. Last Thanksgiving, I spent 3 days preparing dinner. Turkey with herb butter under the skin like his mother used to make. Homemade rolls, sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping he loved. Pecan pie from scratch. I set the table with our good china, the set we got as a wedding gift and only used for special occasions. Michael came to the table, ate quickly, complimented the food in that absent way people do when they're not really tasting it, and went back to his laptop before I'd finished my first plate. I sat alone at that table with enough food for 8 people and realized I'd spent 3 days cooking for someone who couldn't spare 30 minutes to eat with me. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying about these things a long time ago. Crying required energy I no longer had. Instead, I just wrapped up the leftovers and watched Michael work through the evening, his face lit by the blue glow of his screen, completely content in a world that didn't include me. Christmas was somehow worse. We used to make it special. Stay out late on Christmas Eve, wrapping presents, drink hot chocolate, watch old movies. Christmas morning, we'd sleep in, then spend the day lazy and together. Just us. This past Christmas, Michael worked until 7 on Christmas Eve. Came home, went straight to bed. Christmas morning, he was up at 6, back at his computer by 6:30. I sat alone by our tree with the presents I'd wrapped by myself, and when I asked if he wanted to open them, he said, "Maybe later." Later never came. Those presents are still under the tree in the garage. It's January now. I don't think he even remembers they're there. My mother used to say, "You teach people how to treat you." I thought about that a lot this past year. Had I taught Michael that I didn't matter? That he could forget my birthday, ignore our holidays, treat me like furniture, and I'd just accept it? Maybe I had, because I never said anything. Every time he chose work over me, I said it was fine. Every time he forgot something important, I told him I understood. Every time he made me feel invisible, I convinced myself I was asking for too much. I thought I was being a good wife, understanding, supportive, not nagging or demanding or needy. All those words women get called when they dare to ask for basic consideration from the men they married. But I wasn't being a good wife. I was being a quiet one. There's a difference. Susan told me something last month that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. We were having coffee, and I was making excuses for Michael again. Work is stressful. He's under pressure. He doesn't mean to be distant. Janet, she said, cutting me off, when was the last time he asked about your life? About what you do all day? About what matters to you? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. Not the last time, not any time in recent memory. You volunteer at the library twice a week, Susan continued. You're in book club. You take those watercolor classes on Thursdays. Does Michael even know you do those things? I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized he didn't. I'd mentioned the watercolor class when I started it 6 months ago, but I couldn't recall him ever asking how it was going or if I liked it. Couldn't remember him asking to see anything I'd painted. I'd been learning to paint for half a year and my husband had no idea. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just being ignored, I was being erased. All the small pieces that made me who I was, all the things I did and cared about and spent my time on, none of it registered with him. I'd become background noise in my own life. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd told myself it was normal, that this was just what marriage looked like after 3 decades, that I should be grateful he didn't yell or cheat or drink, that being invisible was better than being a burden. But sitting there with Susan, watching her look at me with something between pity and anger on my behalf, I started to wonder if maybe I'd been lying to myself about what I deserved. Maybe being ignored wasn't normal. Maybe it wasn't what marriage was supposed to look like. Maybe I'd spent so many years adjusting to less that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. That night, I went home and looked through our photo albums. Pictures from our wedding, our early years together, vacations we'd taken, moments we'd shared. In every photo from the first 15 years, Michael was looking at me, or touching me, or standing close, like he wanted to be near me. In the photos from the last 10 years, there was space between us. His body angled away, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Like he was fulfilling an obligation, not sharing a life. When had I become an obligation instead of a partner? When had my husband stopped wanting to be in the same room with me? I didn't have answers. But sitting there with those albums spread around me, I started to realize that maybe I'd been asking the wrong questions. The moment everything became impossible to ignore happened on a Wednesday afternoon in April. Not dramatic, not planned, just a regular day that somehow contained all the truth I'd been running from. I'd been having chest pains for 3 days, nothing severe, just this tightness that came and went. I told myself it was stress or maybe heartburn, but on Wednesday morning it got worse. Sharp enough that I sat down on the kitchen floor and waited for it to pass. It scared me. I'm 60 years old. My father died of a heart attack at 63. I called my doctor and they told me to come in right away. Don't drive yourself, the nurse said. Have someone bring you. I called Michael. He was at work, but this felt important enough to interrupt. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. Hey, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? Michael, I'm having chest pains. The doctor wants to see me right away. They said not to drive. Can you come home and take me? Silence. Then how bad is it? I don't know. That's why I need to go to the doctor. Can you call an Uber? I have a meeting in 20 minutes that I really can't miss. Something in my chest tightened, and this time it wasn't physical. Your wife is having chest pains, and you're asking if I can take an Uber? Janet, I'm not trying to be insensitive. But if it was really serious, you'd call an ambulance, right? The meeting is with the regional director. I've been trying to get FaceTime with him for months. I sat there on the kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear, and felt something inside me go completely still. "Okay," I said. "I'll figure it out. Thank you for understanding. I'll check on you tonight. Let me know what the doctor says." He hung up before I could respond. I called Susan. She was there in 15 minutes, drove me to the doctor, sat with me through the exam and the EKG. Turned out it was anxiety. Stress-induced chest pain. The doctor asked me what was going on in my life that might be causing stress. I looked at Susan, she looked back at me, and suddenly I was crying in a way I hadn't cried in years. Not quiet tears. Full sobbing. The kind that comes from someplace deep you didn't know you'd been storing pain. The doctor gave us privacy. Susan held my hand and didn't say anything, just let me cry until I couldn't anymore. "He didn't come," I finally said. "I told him I was having chest pains and he chose a meeting." "I know, honey, I know. What if it had been serious? What if I'd been having a heart attack?" Susan squeezed my hand tighter. "But you weren't, and you're okay." "Am I?" I looked at her. "Am I okay, Susan? Because I don't feel okay. I haven't felt okay in so long, I can't remember what okay feels like anymore." We sat in that examination room for another 20 minutes. I told her things I'd never said out loud about the loneliness, the invisibility. The way I'd convinced myself this was normal, that this was just what marriage became. "You deserve better than this," Susan said quietly. "You know that, right? I didn't know that. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped believing I deserved anything at all." Michael came home at 8:30 that night. I was sitting in the living room, still wearing the same clothes from the doctor's office. "Hey," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "How'd it go? Everything okay?" It was anxiety. Stress-induced chest pain. "Well, that's good. I mean, not good that you're stressed, but good that it's not your heart." He was already walking toward the kitchen. "Is there anything for dinner?" I stayed sitting. "You didn't ask what I'm stressed about." He turned, looking confused. "What?" "You said it's good that I'm stressed, not good for my heart, but you didn't ask why I'm stressed enough to have chest pains. I just assumed it's, I don't know, life stuff. Is there something specific?" I stared at him, really looked at him, this man I'd spent 32 years with. This person who used to know me better than anyone, who used to care enough to ask questions and mean them. "When's my birthday, Michael?" "What? Janet, what does that have to do with anything? Just answer, when is my birthday?" He hesitated. "July 16th, March 14th? It was 2 months ago. You forgot it completely." "Okay, I'm sorry about that, but why are we talking about your birthday right now? What's my favorite color?" "Janet, I don't understand. Just tell me, what's my favorite color?" "Blue? I don't know. Why does this matter?" "It's green. It's been green our entire marriage. I've told you probably 100 times." My voice was shaking, but I kept going. "What do I do on Thursday afternoons?" He stared at me. I could see him trying to remember, trying to come up with an answer. He had nothing. "I take a watercolor class. I've been taking it for 6 months, every Thursday from 2 to 4. Have you ever once asked me how it's going? If I like it? If I've painted anything I'm proud of?" "I didn't know you wanted me to ask about that." "I shouldn't have to want you to ask, Michael. You're my husband. You should care enough to know what I do with my time, to know what matters to me, to know anything about me at all." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know what you want from me, Janet. I work hard to provide for us. I'm doing the best I can. I wanted you to come when I called about chest pains. I wanted you to think I was more important than a meeting. I wanted," my voice broke, "I wanted you to know when my birthday is." This is ridiculous. You're upset about the meeting today and you're taking it out on me about random facts. I can't remember every single detail about everything. These aren't random facts. They're me, Michael. These are basic things about the person you've been married to for 3 decades. And you don't know any of them because you stopped paying attention to me so long ago, you don't even remember when. He looked at me then. Really looked, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or guilt. but not enough to make him say what I needed him to say. "I'm tired, Janet. Can we talk about this another time? I've had a really long day." I watched him walk upstairs, heard the bedroom door close, sat alone in the living room as the light faded outside, and something inside me finally, irreversibly broke. Not broke like shattered, broke like a spell being lifted. Like waking up from a dream I'd been having for years. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar app, started scrolling back through months, then years, looking at all the dates I'd marked. My birthday, our anniversary, the day we talked about going to Vermont. Every single one, forgotten or dismissed or treated like it didn't matter. Then I opened my banking app, something I rarely looked at because Michael handled the finances. But I needed to see, needed to know. There was my name on our joint account. My paycheck from the part-time job I'd taken last year at the library. Deposited automatically every 2 weeks. And next to it, Michael's salary. 3 times what I made, but we'd always said it was ours together. I looked at the spending, where the money went, his lunches out every day. His golf membership? I didn't know he had. New equipment for his home office, a weekend trip to a conference in March, the same weekend as my birthday. He'd told me it was mandatory. I'd believed him. Everything suddenly made sense in the worst possible way. It wasn't that we'd drifted apart. Michael had left a long time ago. He just forgot to tell me. Or maybe he hadn't forgotten. Maybe he'd just never cared enough to bother. I sat in the dark living room of the house I'd lived in for 26 years and realized I had no idea who I'd been married to. Or maybe I did know, and I'd just been too afraid to admit it. At 60 years old, I'd become a stranger in my own life. And my husband, the man who'd promised to be my partner through everything, hadn't just let it happen. He'd never even noticed I was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there in the dark next to Michael, listening to him breathe easily while my mind ran through 32 years on repeat, trying to figure out where I'd lost myself, or if I'd ever really been there at all. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen. Made coffee even though I knew I wouldn't sleep anyway. Sat at the table where I'd eaten thousands of meals alone while my husband chose everything else over me. I started making a list. Not on paper, just in my head. All the things I'd given up, all the pieces of myself I'd set aside thinking I was building a marriage. The teaching job I'd turned down 20 years ago because Michael's promotion meant we'd have to relocate, and I didn't want to disrupt his career. I'd been excited about that job. It was at a private school, good students, room to grow. But his opportunity seemed more important at the time. The creative writing class I'd wanted to take 8 years ago. I'd mentioned it at dinner one night. Michael had said it seemed like a waste of money for a hobby. I never brought it up again. The trip to Ireland my sister invited me on 5 years ago. Just us, 2 weeks exploring the country our grandmother came from. Michael said he couldn't take time off work, and I didn't want to go without him. My sister went with her friend instead. She still talks about it. Friends I'd lost because I was always available until I wasn't. Until I'd cancelled too many times because Michael needed something or had forgotten we had plans and made other ones. The volunteer coordinator position at the library last year, they'd asked me specifically. Said I'd be perfect for it. More responsibility, more hours, more money. I'd told them I needed to check with Michael first. He'd said my part-time schedule worked better for his needs. I never followed up. My needs. When was the last time I'd even thought about what I needed? I pulled out my laptop and opened a document, started typing. Not a list this time, a timeline. Year by year, what I'd sacrificed, what I'd given up, what I'd convinced myself didn't matter because making Michael's life easier seemed more important than living my own. By the time the sun came up, I had 7 pages. 32 years of choosing someone else over myself, of believing that's what love meant, what marriage required. Michael came down at 6:30, poured himself coffee without saying good morning, started checking his phone. "I need you to be honest with me," I said. He looked up, surprised. "About what? Do you still love me?" The question hung there between us. Michael set his phone down, opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Janet, where is this coming from? Just answer the question. Do you love me? Of course I do. You're my wife. That's not what I asked. I asked if you love me, not if you're married to me, not if I'm useful to you. Do you actually love me? He looked uncomfortable. I don't understand why you're asking this. Because you forgot my birthday. Because you couldn't name my favorite color. Because when I had chest pains, you chose a meeting. Because I've been taking a watercolor class for 6 months and you don't even know it exists. Because you don't ask about my day or my life or anything about me at all. Janet, I'm busy. That doesn't mean I don't love you. Then when was the last time you showed it? The last time you did something that made me feel like I mattered to you? Silence. Long enough that we both knew he didn't have an answer. I make sure you have everything you need, he said finally. We have a nice house, financial security. I work hard for this family. There is no family, Michael. There's just you living your life and me existing in the background of it. That's not a marriage. That's me being a service provider you occasionally remember to thank. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me one thing I like, one dream I have, one thing that matters to me outside of taking care of you. He stared at his coffee, said nothing. You can't, I said quietly, because you don't know. Because you stopped caring about who I am a long time ago. I never stopped caring. We got comfortable. This is what happens in long marriages. No, Michael, this is what happens when one person stops trying and the other person is too afraid to admit it. He stood up, frustrated. What do you want from me, Janet? You want me to apologize for working? For providing for us? For not being perfect? I want you to notice I exist. I want you to care when I'm hurting. I stopped because I realized I was asking for something he'd never give me. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. I'm going to work, Michael said. We can talk about this tonight when you're calmer. He left. I heard the car start, back out of the driveway, disappear down the street. And I sat in the kitchen we'd shared for 26 years, drinking coffee that had gone cold, and made a decision. I couldn't change Michael. I couldn't make him see me or love me or care about me the way I'd spent 3 decades hoping he would. But I could change what I did about it. I pulled out my phone and called Susan. I need your help, I said when she answered. I need to figure out what my life looks like without him. Are you leaving him? Susan asked gently. I don't know yet, but I need to know I could if I wanted to. I need to know what that would even mean. I've been his wife for so long, I don't remember who I am without him. Come over, Susan said. We'll figure it out together. I drove to Susan's house with my 7-page document and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It hurt. God, it hurt to see my whole life written out like that. All the things I'd given up, all the ways I'd made myself smaller, thinking that's what I was supposed to do. But it also felt like something breaking open inside me, not breaking apart. Breaking free. Susan made tea and we sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. The chest pains. The quiz, Michael failed. The banking information that showed a life I wasn't really part of, the list of sacrifices that now seemed less like love and more like erasure. What do you want, Janet? Susan asked. Not what Michael wants, not what you think you should want. What do you actually want? I thought about it, really thought. I want to matter, I said. I want to wake up and feel like my life belongs to me. I want to make choices because they're what I want, not because they're convenient for someone who doesn't even notice I'm there. Then you already know what you need to do. Maybe I did. Maybe I'd known for a while and just wasn't ready to admit it. At 60 years old, I was finally learning something I should have known decades ago. You can't love someone into loving you back, and staying in a marriage where you've disappeared isn't loyalty. Susan gave me the name of a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, she said. Just someone who could explain what my options were, what I'd be entitled to if I decided to leave, what staying would mean legally and financially. I called on Thursday morning after Michael left for work, made an appointment for the following Tuesday. My hands shook the entire phone call. Not because I'd decided anything for certain, just because calling a lawyer made this real in a way thinking about it didn't. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 32 years of marriage. I opened my own bank account, just in my name, at a different bank than the one Michael used. The woman who helped me was maybe 30. She asked if I wanted to add my husband to the account. I said no. She didn't ask why. Maybe she'd seen this before. Women my age sitting across from her with shaking hands, opening accounts their husbands didn't know about. I deposited $500. It was from the library job, money I'd saved from my paychecks over the past 6 months. I'd been putting it aside for Christmas gifts, but Michael probably wouldn't notice if I bought smaller gifts this year. He never noticed anything else. Walking out of that bank felt like the first free breath I'd taken in years. That night, I changed all my passwords. Email, social media, the laptop I used for my volunteer work, small things. But they were mine. Private spaces Michael couldn't access without asking. Places where I existed separately from being his wife. He came home at 8. I was making dinner. He didn't ask about my day, didn't notice that something had shifted in me, just grabbed a beer from the fridge and disappeared into the living room. I stood at the stove, stirring pasta. I didn't feel like eating and realized he could live with me forever and never see that I'd changed, because he'd never really been looking in the first place. On Tuesday, I met with the lawyer. Her name was Patricia. She was maybe 50. Kind eyes, no wedding ring. She asked me to tell her about my marriage. I gave her the short version, the erosion, the invisibility, the chest pains he'd ignored. "Do you have children?" she asked. "No, we tried for years. It didn't happen." That actually makes things simpler. Assets are the main consideration. "How long have you been married?" 32 years. She wrote that down. In this state, that means you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. The house, retirement accounts, savings, even his pension. Half of everything. The words felt strange. I'd spent 3 decades thinking of it all as ours, but Michael had stopped thinking that way a long time ago. Maybe it was time I did too. "What if I'm not sure?" I asked. "What if I don't know if I want to leave?" "Then you don't do anything yet. But it helps to know what your options are. Knowledge is power, Janet, even if you never use it." I left her office with a folder full of information I wasn't sure I'd ever need, but having it felt important, like I'd taken back a piece of control I'd given away without realizing. On Wednesday, I called the volunteer coordinator at the library, asked if that position was still available. She said it was. Said they'd held it hoping I'd reconsider. I told her I'd take it, 20 hours a week instead of 10, better pay, real responsibility. When I told Michael that night, he barely looked up from his phone. "Is that going to interfere with dinner?" Not congratulations. Not "I'm proud of you." Not even a question about what the job entailed, just concern about how it would affect him. "I'll manage," I said. Friday night, Susan invited me to a book club meeting, a different one than our usual group. This one was at a wine bar downtown. Women my age talking about books and life and everything in between. I hadn't been out on a Friday night in years. Michael always wanted dinner at home. "I'm going out tonight," I told him that afternoon. "Where?" "Book club. I'll be home around 10. He nodded. Didn't ask which book, didn't ask who I'd be with, just went back to his laptop. I wore the blue dress, the one from the lasagna dinner he never noticed. But I wasn't wearing it for him this time. I was wearing it for me, because I liked how it looked, because I wanted to. The book club was wonderful. 8 women I'd never met, all smart and funny and full of stories. We talked about the book for maybe 20 minutes. The rest of the night was just conversation. Real conversation about real things. About marriages and work and dreams we'd put aside and dreams we were finally chasing. A woman named Margaret had divorced her husband 3 years ago after 35 years of marriage. "Best decision I ever made," she said. "I spent 3 decades trying to make him happy. Turns out the person I should have been trying to make happy was me." Everyone nodded. Like they understood exactly what she meant. I got home at 10:30. Michael was already in bed. Didn't ask how my night was. Didn't ask about the book or the women or anything. The next morning, he didn't mention I'd gone out at all. I could have gone anywhere, done anything. He wouldn't have known, wouldn't have cared. That's when I understood something crucial. I wasn't leaving Michael. I'd already left. Emotionally, mentally, I'd been gone for a while. My body was just catching up to what my heart already knew. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept taking small steps. Joined a gym, signed up for a photography class on Saturdays, started having lunch with Margaret from book club. I wasn't being dramatic or making announcements. I was just quietly building a life that belonged to me, filling the space I'd been living in with things that made me feel alive instead of invisible. Michael noticed exactly none of it, and that told me everything I needed to know. One Sunday morning, I woke up and looked at him sleeping next to me. This man I built my entire adult life around. And I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, not even resentment anymore, just a calm, clear certainty that I deserved better than this. That staying in a marriage where I'd disappeared wasn't noble or patient or understanding. It was just another way of telling myself I didn't matter. I got up and made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table with the morning sun coming through the window. And for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not that Michael would change, not that our marriage would magically fix itself, but hope that I could build something new, something that actually included me. It's been 4 months since that Wednesday when I had chest pains and my husband chose a meeting. 4 months since I started asking myself questions I'd been too afraid to ask for years. I haven't left Michael. Not yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But what's changed is that now I know I could. And that knowledge has shifted everything. I'm not waiting anymore. Not waiting for him to notice me. Not waiting for him to change. Not waiting for permission to live a life that feels like mine. The volunteer coordinator job at the library has become the best part of my week. 20 hours where I'm Janet, not Michael's wife. Where people ask my opinion and listen to my answers. Where I'm making decisions that matter and building something I'm proud of. Last month, they asked me to organize the Spring Literacy Fundraiser. 200 people attended. We raised $8,000. I stood at that podium and gave a speech about the importance of reading programs, and people clapped, really clapped, for me. For work I'd done. Michael didn't come. I'd invited him 3 weeks in advance, put it on the calendar, reminded him twice. He said he'd try to make it. He didn't. Something came up at work. A year ago, that would have crushed me. I would have stood at that podium feeling like a failure because my own husband couldn't show up for me. But that night, I barely thought about him. I was too busy feeling proud of myself. The photography class has been teaching me to see things differently, not just through a camera lens, but in general. My instructor said something a few weeks ago that stuck with me. She said, "The best photographs aren't about what you capture. They're about what you choose to focus on." I've been focusing on the wrong things for 32 years, focusing on what was missing instead of what I could build, on what Michael wasn't giving me instead of what I could give myself. Susan and I have coffee every Tuesday morning now. Margaret from book club and I go to art exhibits on Sunday afternoons when Michael's watching golf. I've reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. Joined a hiking group for women over 50. Last weekend, 6 of us hiked 8 miles through the state park. I'm 60 years old and I hiked 8 miles. Came home exhausted and exhilarated and more alive than I'd felt in years. Michael was on the couch when I got back. Asked if we had anything for dinner. Didn't ask where I'd been or why I was glowing. Didn't notice the mud on my shoes or the joy on my face. I made a sandwich and took it to my room. Yes, my room. I moved into the guest bedroom 6 weeks ago. Told Michael I was having trouble sleeping and needed my own space. He said okay and went back to his show. We're roommates now, officially. Which is really just making honest what we've been for years. Some nights I lie in that guest bedroom and think about what comes next. whether I'll actually file for divorce or if this strange new arrangement is enough. If being free inside a marriage I'm not really in anymore is the same as being free. I don't have those answers yet, but I'm learning to be okay with not knowing, learning that I don't have to decide my entire future in one moment. That small steps still count as movement. My sister called last week, asked if I wanted to go to Ireland with her next spring. 7 days exploring the country our grandmother came from. The trip I'd said no to 5 years ago because Michael needed me here. "I'd love to," I said. "Didn't check with Michael first." Didn't ask if it was convenient, just said yes because I wanted to go. That's the difference now. I'm saying yes to things I want, no to things I don't. Building a life that includes me instead of erasing myself to make room for someone who never noticed I was gone. Am I happy? People keep asking me that. Susan, Margaret, my sister, even the woman at the bank where I opened my account. I tell them I'm getting there. Some days I wake up and feel lighter than I have in decades. Some days I still ache for the marriage I thought I had, the man I thought I married, the partnership that maybe only existed in my head. But even on the hard days, I know something I didn't know 6 months ago. I know I matter, not because someone else tells me so, not because I've made myself useful or convenient or quiet enough, just because I'm here. Because I exist. Because I deserve to take up space in my own life. If you're still with me after all this, if this story felt familiar in ways that hurt to recognize, I want you to know something. You're not asking for too much when you want to be seen. You're not being difficult when you expect basic consideration. You're not selfish for wanting a life that feels like yours. If stories like this resonate with you, stay connected. You can like the video and subscribe. We talk about the real things here, the truths we carry quietly, the feelings we've been told don't matter but do. At 60 years old, I'm finally learning what I should have known all along. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't love someone into loving you back, and staying in a place where you've disappeared isn't loyalty. It's just a quiet way of saying goodbye to yourself. I don't know what my future looks like, whether I'll be married or divorced or something in between. Whether Michael will ever wake up and see what he's lost, or if he'll just keep sleeping through his own life. But I know what I look like in it. Present, visible, taking up the space I deserve, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, that's enough.